Could we have introductions of you guys?
Oh, yeah. Mark Zussman.
That's me.
Title is former publisher, current part owner, something. Lucas Manfield, reporter. Nigel Jaquist, reporter. Sophie Peel, reporter. Aaron Mesh, editor-in-chief. Anthony Effinger, reporter. Brian Panganiban, everything.
Yeah, I've been promoted. I'm the managing editor.
Oh, that's right.
I'm not the
Zodiac
editor-in-chief.
sign, birthday, that's good.
Editor-in-chief.
Just
Right?
watched a coup happen right there.
Never mind.
We're here for it.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
We would like to start by
I could have pulled that off.
we would have liked to start by having each of you briefly look into the camera, introduce yourself, give us like a 1-minute bio of who you are, any work experience you have, any related civic or community experience, why you're running. Try to keep that within a minute or more.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start with Jesse.
Good morning, I'm Jesse Cornett. I've worked around the policy process 19 out of the last 24 years. Had some pretty fun early career wins, including creating Orastar, the campaign finance database in Oregon, bringing campaign finance disclosure into light for the first time in our state's history. I helped fund building projects on the campus of Portland State, run a couple businesses.
Sorry, can you slow down just a little? I know we said
Yes.
1 minute, but just slow down a little bit. You can have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
All right. Operated a couple of businesses along the way. Worked for both the Bernie Sanders campaigns for president, including serving as the body man during the 2020 race, which was a very fun role. I came back to Oregon after that and immediately re-engaged in the civic life here. Had a contract with the Oregon Latino Health Coalition.
Contract with who?
Oregon Latino Health Coalition, where I was the lead lobbyist to get health care for about 55,000 Oregonians. So it was a very proud career achievement for me. By day, I worked with the addiction advocacy nonprofit Oregon Recovers as the policy and advocacy director. I'm somebody in long-term recovery. And yeah, I think that's...
And why are you running for office?
I am running for office because after working around elected officials and policy for a long time, I realized that I was no longer satisfied seeing the solutions coming out of especially City Hall, and thinking that with the experience I've amassed, I can make a difference.
Great, thank you. Steve.
I'm Steve Novick. I'm an environmental lawyer for the state. In the 90s, I was an environmental lawyer for the federal government. In between, I spent 22 years in Oregon politics and public policy, including 4 years on the city council. And I'm running in part because I think that in a brand new council, it'll be useful to have some folks who have not just experience getting things done, but the humility that comes with experience. I don't have any silver bullet answers to our big problems. What I do have is the commitment to focus on making sure that we are spending money on things that are effective and cost effective, whether we're talking about homelessness or public safety or climate change, and making sure that what we're doing is backed up by evidence, and if we're doing things that aren't backed up by evidence, we shouldn't be spending money on them.
Okay, that's concise. Rex.
Rex Berkelberg. I am a 40-year plus resident of the city of Portland and worked those whole years in civic activism, from starting with recycling, starting one of the first home recycling companies, helping start that, I should say, home recycling companies in the city, and going on to founding the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, where I led policy there for 10 years, which got me excited and interested in regional transportation policy. And I served as a volunteer on a number of committees, including the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for the state and an advisory committee at Metro. And I said, oh, I'd like to be on the other side of that table, help make decisions instead of just ask for things to happen. And served 12 years on Metro, very similar government with 7 counselors and a manager. And then after I left Metro, after I was turned out, I have a nonprofit consulting firm for nonprofits and candidates, and we work with various nonprofits on helping their boards be more effective. I also ran the Outdoor School for All campaign, which got funding, so 50,000 Oregon kids get to get outdoor school again. And I'm running because all those skills are going to be really important in this new form of government that needs us to develop collaborative structures and get to work to make sure the city works. I don't think we have time to waste. So that team building, collaboration, and results orientation is what I bring to the council.
Do you still run the consulting firm?
I do.
Okay, and what nonprofits are your clients?
Well, currently Unite Oregon, the Portland Business Development Group, the Portland Gay Men's Chorus was a recent one. Those are our major clients at the moment.
What was the second one you said?
The Portland Business Development Group.
What's that?
It's a group that worked with COVID companies, what
Okay.
we used to call minority and women-owned companies, and they work to help develop their skill sets and advocate for the needs of small businesses. And we
Great.
do communications and strategy work with them.
Got it. Thank you. Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel DeMello. I'm a second-generation American. I'm a Kearns resident. I'm a software engineer and engineering manager by trade. My data-driven approach to addressing the public safety issues and homelessness here in Portland has earned the support of our firefighters, our EMTs, our 911 operators, and our police officers. But the primary reason I'm in this race is because of the experience I've had over the last 2 years chairing the Joint Office of Homeless Services, Community Budget Advisory Committee, and the Central Budget Advisory Committee at Multnomah County, overseeing $4 billion in public spending on behalf of 800,000 Multnomah County residents. And I won't bore anyone with the dry and frustrating details. Suffice to say, we aren't doing enough to address unsheltered homelessness. But this year we went to the city and county and said, look, you're gonna spend $70,000 for every single person on the street. Can you commit and say that this plan will lead to at least one fewer people sleeping on the street? And they could not and would not make that commitment. And that's why I'd like to see in this new city council, councilors who are ready to make sure that we're taking that first step to ending unsheltered homelessness. I'm a data-driven, I'm a numbers guy. I know that if you want to end unsheltered homelessness, it begins with reducing unsheltered homelessness, which begins with getting just one more people off of our streets. And that's why I'm running for this new city
Stephen,
council.
I'm sorry, your work as a, you say you're a software engineer?
Yes.
Who do you work for?
I was working for a small New York-based company through February, and then I got laid off. Silver linings.
What was the company?
It's called App Figures.
App Figures?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're currently unemployed, is that
Currently
right?
unemployed.
Gotcha. And the committee you serve on, it's a budget committee for the joint office?
Yes.
It's a citizens budget committee?
Yes.
Which means you review the budget, have no authority?
No authority.
Gotcha.
We just give them advice, and they usually don't listen to it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Tiffany.
And I speak to the camera, right?
Well, actually, maybe speak to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, that seems a little awkward.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Tiffany Koyama-Lane. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also known around Portland as Teacher Tiffany. I'm in my 16th year as a public school educator. I currently teach 3rd grade at Sunnyside Environmental School. I'm a mom. I have a 7-year-old and 9-year-old. They're in 2nd and 3rd grade in Portland Public Schools. I'm a union organizer.
For PAT?
Yeah, I'm a leader in my union, and I'm also a community organizer. I'm also Yonsei, which means I'm 4th generation Japanese American. And I feel called to run for the new Portland City Council because the challenges that we see in our city, they show up in my classroom. I have had students, just last year, I had a student that brought her dirty clothes to school because she doesn't have access to a washer dryer. I had a 5th grader, he and his mom were evicted from their home near our school, and I watched that play out and saw what that did to that family when that kid was pushed way out to East Portland and was taking 3 city buses to get to school each day. I can go on and on. Anyone that's worked in public schools has a lot of stories. I know that these stories aren't just specific to my classroom. They're things that families are dealing with throughout our city. I believe that we need people who are close to these challenges, that know what it feels like to raise a family of 4 on a teacher's salary in Portland. Representation isn't everything, but it is important. We've never had anyone Asian American on Portland City Council ever, and I hope that changes after this election cycle. My vision for Portland is a safe, housed, connected city, and I'm excited to talk more about that in this meeting.
Great, thank you. Angelita?
Hi everyone, I'm Angelita Morillo, or Angelita Murillo for those of you that speak Spanish. I'm a first-generation immigrant from Paraguay. I moved to the United States when I was 4 years old with my mom and my sister. And in my day job, I'm an anti-hunger policy advocate. I work at Partners for a Hunger-Free Oregon. Sorry, I know that's a mouthful. I told them to cut the name down, but they said no. I am trying to pass policies like school meals for all, food for all Oregonians, anti-hunger policies with legislators that expand food access access, SNAP access to our most vulnerable communities in Oregon. I've also worked in constituent services and tribal relations policy in City Hall, so I know what it's like to connect people to services when they're missing out on those services. And I am someone who has experienced unsheltered homelessness in the city of Portland for about a year when I was in college. So I have direct experience with what it's like to be someone who is left out and who is missing from that outreach, and what it's going to take to make sure that vulnerable people have enough trust and faith in the government that they're going to be responsive to the services that are available. I decided to run because there was a city council meeting on the mass encampments where I knew a bunch of unhoused people were going to sign up to testify to give city council their feedback on the policy. And on that day, there was a city commissioner that allowed wealthy people and developers to cut in front of the testimony line, which is unheard of. And those unhoused people who waited hours to testify didn't get a shelter bed that night, and they didn't get a voice on their council.
Is that Dan Ryan?
Yeah. And that was the day that I decided I was going to run.
What legislators do you work most closely with in your job?
I would say Senator Winsway Campos. She's usually a chief sponsor for a lot of anti-hunger bills. There's a pretty, Courtney Neuron is going to be for school meals for all. Who else?
Have you guys been able to pass any legislation over the past, like what's the proudest legislation or biggest piece of legislation you guys have been able to pass in the past 5 years?
I've been there for 2.5 years, and most bills are going to take four or five sessions to pass, to be frank with you. So Food for All Oregonians and School Meals for All, the two big ones that I'm working on, are going up for the January 2025 session.
And chief sponsor for those is Winsby Campos.
Food for All Oregonians is Winsby Campos. School Meals for All is Courtney Neuron.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Wait, what year were you? You were unsheltered homeless in college?
Yes.
Where were you in college?
I was at PSU.
Wow, and you were going to college, and
Yes.
that was some challenge.
Yeah, it was not a good time.
Okay, homelessness is top priority for Portlanders, and I'll ask each of you this question, and please try to keep it to a minute or less. We've got a lot of ground to cover. First, kind of two-part question. One, do you support the city remaining in the Joint Office of Homeless Services? And two, where are the city and county going wrong in homelessness? Angelita, let's start with you.
I do support the city and county staying within the Joint Office of Homeless Services. I think it's pretty easy to say we should start something from the ground up, and I think that's a fantasy that people always think it's so easy to put something together. It's not. I think that the big change that needs to happen is that we have millions of dollars that are being unused in the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and what we really need is adequate staff to make sure that those dollars are actually getting out the door and being allocated appropriately. From what I've heard, it sounds like a lot of the staff are really struggling there. I work in a nonprofit. I know what it's like to be pretty underfunded and understaffed. So I think that making sure that those dollars are getting out the door is going to be the most crucial part of it.
Just to be clear, you believe that the problem is that the Joint Office needs to hire more employees?
Specifically within the financial department that is sending out the grants and dollars. Yes.
Okay.
And then as far as the unused dollars, where do you think those dollars should be going?
I think they really need to be going towards transitional housing and building out shelter spaces. A focus of mine with regards to shelter is domestic violence shelters. We don't really have any in the city of Portland, and we're actually sending out a lot of people who are experiencing domestic violence. There's nowhere for them to go overnight that same day, so we're sending them to surrounding counties like Clackamas. I've spoken with a lot of folks that work at Call to Safety, and they have told me a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that's happening, and we just simply don't have anywhere for people to go when they're experiencing domestic violence.
And when you say more shelter, what kind of shelter are you talking? Congregate shelter, tiny pods, hotel rooms?
I think we're going to need a variety of things that work based on people's, different experiences and trauma levels, the different supportive services that they need. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I would really love to see the city focus on acquiring some permanent buildings, though, and turning those into shelters. I think the big example that I always used as a missed opportunity is the Concordia University dorms. When those were available for purchase, I wish that the city had seized that opportunity and turned that into communal housing.
Great, thank you. Tiffany.
Can you repeat the question? There were two parts to it, right?
Yes, 2 parts. Do you support the city remaining in the Joint Office?
Yes.
And where are the city and county going wrong in regards to how they're tackling homelessness or not tackling homelessness?
So I do support them staying together because a huge piece I know is coordination. And I know that that is where a lot of complaints have been, is that there is siloing, there is duplicated efforts. And so the place we need to really be working on is making sure that city and county are working together. I've spent some time already meeting with current county commissioners, folks that
Who
want to be
you
in,
met with?
Julie Brim Edwards. And something that she did tell me, I know this is different from your question, is that she is feeling like things are moving in the right direction, that there's more coordination, there's more communication. So I think as much de-siloing as we can do is what's important. I had someone who lived in my neighborhood for 20 years, homeless, and a couple years ago he said, hey, neighbors, I would like to get into housing. A bunch of us worked as kind of pseudo social workers. He also had someone through the Northwest Pilot Project that worked full time with him to get him into housing. This is someone that was like, I'm ready to get into housing. It took over a year. And also the person that was working on that, the housing navigator, had to work 2 jobs to pay her rent. So something that I'm really thinking about is making sure that those jobs are sustainable, making sure that
How do you make sure those jobs are sustainable? Is it just about raising salary?
I think it's about making sure there's a living wage, they're getting a living wage, making sure that we're building the bench and that there's not as high of burnout. So in Washington, there are some programs to build the bench with social workers. These are some of the hardest jobs in the city. We need to be making sure that those folks are feeling supported. They don't need to work an extra job to pay their rent, and then also that we have enough folks to do these jobs. This is some of the hardest work. I think we need more housing navigators than not.
Do you think the joint office is paying their nonprofit contractors too much or too little?
I'd be interested in learning more about those specifics.
All right, thank you. Daniel?
If we're not able to see meaningful change against the metrics that the council put together for continuing the joint office contract in October, we should leave the agreement.
By October?
By October.
So
As
just
in-
7 days?
This month.
Yeah.
October 24th.
It's the October 15th review, Greg,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. That's just the basic. You have to hold government accountable. Government has to hold government accountable. And if they are not delivering on an agreement, then we should leave to make sure.
Why do you think they're
Not able to deliver on the agreement? I think they are not approaching the problem from the correct perspective. And so I want to push back, I guess, on some of what we're talking about here, which is just that when on this joint office committee, one of the things that made me very cynical about our approach, and I joined not cynically, really just wanting to ask the questions that my neighbors had. One of the things that made me very cynical is they said, look, we are spending more and more money, but we see more and more unsheltered people on the street. Do you have any projections about how much more money you would need to at least maintain the current number of people on the street? And they didn't. They didn't have a timeline for when we might be able to expect less unsheltered people on the street. And I know we talk a lot about setting up these nonprofits, setting up institutional capacity, but the truth is the goal of the joint office should be its own abolition. And they didn't like it when I suggested that. We should not need homeless services because in the end we should not have 6,000, 4,000 people unsheltered on our streets. I think where we're going wrong in this approach is that we're not solving the basic problems before we're solving the hard problems. Mental health, drug addiction, housing costs, there's a lot of factors when it comes to unsheltered homelessness, but the unsheltered part is pretty simple. We've been sheltering people as a species for 20,000 years. Mental health care has been around for 100 years. In 1941, we built 18,000 units of shelter here in Portland in just 110 days. It's the federal government who did it. But if we solved our problem today using the approach that we had 80 years ago, we would have sheltered everyone on the street in just 1 month.
So we recently heard of a statistic that over the past year, 90% of homeless Portlanders that were offered a shelter bed declined. So is it really about a lack of, we hear this a lot, that we just don't have enough shelter, but almost every single night there's empty shelter beds. How do you solve for that problem?
I think there's in some ways a mismatch between some of the shelter variety that's available and the kinds of services that people would want to be brought in. I also totally understand some trepidation about going into shelter, right? Nobody wants to be in a shelter. I think unequivocally under the state law, we can 100% enforce the camping restrictions once we have 100% shelter capacity. And when I sat down with our firefighters, I said, look, and it was kind of a joke, but I'm serious, that I want firefighters who can go in to their station house and spend their shift sitting there watching TV, right? Ideally, when you have responses to emergencies ready to go, you never have to use them. You might have an AED in the office here. I don't know if you've ever used it, but you have it because it needs to be ready to go. I'd love for us to have too much shelter so that when there's a wildfire in the Dalles or in the West Hills, that we can shelter people immediately while we get ready to deal with the housing, the drug addiction, and mental health care services in the long run.
One last question. So if the city were to leave the joint office, my understanding is that the county, when we did this agreement, they are taking on the Clinton Triangle,
Yeah.
which is the tiny pod site. They manage quite a few of the tiny pod homes. So what would the city do? Would we just say, hey, hands off, we're not doing any of this shit? Like what would the city's role be?
I would like to see, ideally they follow through on those goals. I'm not a betting man, I'm not sure if they will. I think if we leave the agreement, we should still work on setting up shelters. We are, I think, have been more effective in the county at getting new shelter sites developed. I would love for us to take the lead and say, we're going to develop new shelter sites and the county's going to come in and run them.
Okay, all right, thank you. Rex?
Well, I do not have the in-depth knowledge that Daniel has, obviously, on this issue, but totally supportive of that collaboration, coordination. If we've had some stumbles, my experience in government tells me a lot of times it's personalities, and we've had some personality clashes between the leadership of the county and the city.
Do you think that's still true?
It's changing with the new leadership at the county, and I hope that continues to change. So there is some personality impacts on this. Do people get along? Do they agree to coordinate? Do they have humility, as Steve says, to be able to work with each other? I think the biggest part is having the outcomes and having accountability for meeting or not meeting those outcomes. I know Dan Field from his work at Kaiser. I worked with him when I was at Metro, and I have a lot of confidence in him as a manager. I think there might be some ideas that we should be thinking about. Like right now, we contract everything out. I think it was a response to Measure 5. We thought we'd save money to the taxpayers and be able to get more for less by contracting out so many of our services. And obviously, the jobs are not stable. They don't pay enough in the nonprofit sector. Should we go back to a different model where we had...
As in bring more services in-house rather than contracting?
Yeah, and one, you might actually save money because you don't have the overhead that you're paying. Every nonprofit has to have an overhead to be able to run, right? So can we put that into salaries, and can we have stable jobs that for people delivering and professionals delivering those services? I think the idea of thinking, is the model working or not? And if it's not working, it's not just the personalities that doesn't help all the time, but it's also, is the model the right model? And if it's not working, and people who know more than I do say it's not working, even though it seems like the streets are improving based on I ride everywhere on my bike, and the camps have diminished, and it's less scary out there. And so something is changing. Hopefully people are going to shelter. Which I think is the number one goal we have, is have everybody have a safe shelter to go to.
Who do you see as sort of the troublesome personalities right now that are creating this?
Well, I think it's changing. Like I said, there was the previous county chair and current mayor just didn't get along. It's pretty public, and had very strong personalities and did not coordinate as well as they.
And you think that's better now that Jessica Vega-Peterson is chair?
And the change at the leadership at the county is changing, and I think with this transition going on with the city, we'll see a different approach.
Great, thank you. Steve?
So I think that the city should stay in until you reach a point where the city has made a variety of requests to the county about how money was being spent, and those requests haven't been met. So I think that the threat of withdrawal needs to be there, but I don't think that they should be withdrawing immediately. In terms of what folks have done wrong, one thing I don't think that we've seen is enough transparent analysis of, here's how we're spending money, here's how we know it's effective in keeping people off the streets. For example, this county spends a bunch of money on temporary rent assistance. I'd like to see studies of, here's 100 people who got temporary rent assistance, here's 100 similarly situated people who didn't, what are the results after a year or two? I think that the city should be pushing the county to spend more money on things that seem like they're successful. And one example is the tiny house villages, which is the early data are people are more willing to go there, they get their heads together, they're more able to transfer into permanent housing when that's available. I think the county obviously has come along with the idea that that's a reasonable investment. One way the city can help is, when you talk to people in City Hall, they say it's hard to find sites for the tiny house villages. But you talk to other people who say, well, they haven't professionalized the process of looking for them. It's being done by staff at a City Hall. You should hire a group of people, that's their job, is to find sites. And one particular thing I'd like the city to look at, and I have nothing against golf or publicly owned golf courses, but we have some big plots of land that are called golf courses, and I've talked to some folks who think it would be reasonable to evaluate those as possibilities for tiny home sites.
What's number one on your list?
I knew you were going to answer that question. I don't remember. I talked to this builder and he rattled off two
I'm
city
just wondering if it's in your district. If the golf course you want to consider.
I wouldn't rule out. I know there's one in my district, and I wouldn't rule it out. I would think they should all be evaluated. And what I've told people who say that, well, that's unfair to the golfers is, yes, it's asking people to make a sacrifice, but we do not have a golf crisis in the city of Portland. We do have a homelessness crisis.
Great, thank you. Jesse?
So I don't start at a point of wanting to remove the city from the joint office process.
Sorry, you don't want to remove?
No, I think we should
okay.
stay in for now. I do think that's something that we could take a good long look at over the course of the next year. The city failed to do an ongoing contract 2 consecutive years, but this June they decided to do a lasting contract, a 3-year contract. With the October 15th look back, it doesn't escape me that 3 of the 5 members of the current city commission are all running for mayor, and that's the same exact week that ballots get mailed out. It is absolutely, completely bald-faced political, and exemplifies the fact that we are treating the county like an adversary and not like a partner. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to begin to treat the county like a partner. We need to work to strengthen that partnership. We need to have ongoing conversations, councilors, commissioners, council president, county chair, and make sure that we're working toward solutions. And a lot of the things that have been mentioned before me today in terms of looking at the numbers and making sure this is working right. We are seeing incremental successes. I'm proud to be supported by Julia Rim Edwards, and I've talked to her many times about how there is progress finally being made. And I want to continue down that path.
Great, thank you.
Just if I can.
Yes.
It's everybody's aware that the county and the city can't even be in the same room together, that there's no love lost. You seem to be blaming the city. A lot of people in the city we talk to blame the county. But do you have a different perspective? Is it really the city's
I think
shares
it's
most of the burden for not getting along with the county?
I believe it takes 2 to tango. Their relationship is soured, and it's.
But I get a sense you're blaming the city more than the county. If I'm wrong, tell me.
I believe what the city did with the contract was unnecessarily aggressive.
Which
So,
part? The timeline.
Let's do a 3-year contract in June, but we're going to look at it when the ballots come out to see if we're good with this. So that's just unnecessarily aggressive.
And this next question I'll ask everyone, please try to keep it to under a minute. I might get a little bit more aggressive about cutting you off. I don't mean to be a jerk, I promise. First policy or ordinance that you would bring to your city council colleagues if you're elected. And I'm just gonna mix up the order a little bit so Angelita doesn't have to answer all these questions first. Daniel, let's start with you.
I want to be able to work with staff to get the specifics of larger policy, right? I would like to see us, coming to council with the specifics already put together, but immediately, first thing I want to see the city actually make a commitment and say that, look, one of our goals as a city is to end unsheltered homelessness. It has not actually been the stated policy of the city that one of our goals is to end unsheltered homelessness for the last 9 years.
Do you think, but the city and the county set these types of goals every 5-10 years and nothing changes. How do you actually make that substantive?
I would agree that we've really been failing the last 10 years, but home forward, we did see some reduction in unsheltered homelessness in Bud Clark's 12-point plan. After that was put in place, we did see some reduction in unsheltered homelessness. We solved some of this before. We didn't get down to 0, but at least saying, look, let's make this a commitment and say this is one of our city goals. That's why I would bring that first before I can come in and say, all right, here's the specifics.
The city has a lot of goals. PBOT has said that we're going to have 0 traffic deaths for 10 years, and it goes up every. That would be your first ordinance or policy, making a commitment.
Well, because I want to be able to work with staff to get the specifics around. Here's how we're going to approach these problems, right? I would like to see the city say, work to identify slots, places that we already have sites to put new shelters, to put new safe rest villages. I think the best way for Portlanders to evaluate whether this charter change was effective or not is to look at unsheltered homelessness. And it's not just because the more than 15,000 Portlanders I've called over the course of this campaign all tell me that their top issue, 90% of them say that their top issue is unsheltered homelessness. And it gets in front of all of these other issues, right? Like half the fires we're responding to are homelessness related, half the homicides homelessness related. If we had no increase in unsheltered homelessness since we adopted Vision Zero, we wouldn't have seen any increase in the number of traffic deaths, because today half of the pedestrians dying in traffic are unsheltered and homeless. So I'd like to see us make that commitment first, and then the second thing I will bring is that plan and that policy working with the experts to put us on a path to ending unsheltered homelessness and building enough capacity to shelter everybody.
Thank you. Tiffany?
I mean, when people ask me, like, what are your top issues? And I can list them, and I will give you one specifically, but also so many things are overlapping and tangled together. But something I am passionate about is making sure that we're thinking about the big picture and also the immediate. So when people are in crisis, I believe we need to be able to have a crisis team that we can call, and it needs to be 24/7. So I believe Portland Street Response needs to be fully funded. It needs to be 24/7. As someone that sees children in crisis, I know that you can't have office hours for when someone is in crisis.
Where do we get the money? I mean, I think a lot of people support the expansion of Portland Street Response, but the city has we have no extra money next budget year. We already know that we're going to have to make cuts. Where do you divert that funding from in order to fully fund?
So I know budgets are moral documents, and I think it's something that we have to look really closely at. And if this is something that's important, we need to make sure that it is fully funded. It touches on concerns about homelessness, about safety. We know that it works. We've seen in Eugene this working for decades. Most cities have this option that's 24/7. LA, Orange County, San Diego. We need to make sure that we're providing this service and prioritizing it.
Great,
With all
thank
due
you.
respect, I don't think you answered the question. I think what Sophie's looking for is, you're responsible for helping look at the city budget and for controlling costs. Where would you take money from? You're running for office. You must have taken a look at the city budget. Where would you trim to be able to expand the programs you want to expand? What cuts would you make? Who would lose their job? What departments would get harmed? These are the hard decisions.
It is really hard, yeah. As someone that comes from the labor movement, I do always want to look at management and just see where that can be trimmed. I think community-facing supports need to always be, those jobs that are on the ground need to be centered.
Great, thank you. Angelita?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yes, so what would be the first ordinance or policy that you would bring to your colleagues on city council?
Okay, easy. I would love to establish a task force to identify the empty lots of land that are currently owned by the city in order to establish shelters, places where we can have land trusts to build affordable housing, that sort of thing, because right now it's kind of living within each different office. People are just trying to find the empty lots of land, and I think it needs to be a centralized place. We could do that district by district, or we could do that with everybody together as a council. I think that's just been something that I have seen over the past few years when I worked on council. Is the land is the most expensive part.
So this is an issue that came up when the city was trying to site these safe rest villages. I think they had all the bureaus basically submit their empty plots of land, and I think there were like 150. Between 100 and 150, and they basically ruled out like 98% of them for like soil contamination, or a variety of factors. How would this be any different than what they did 2 years ago?
I think that we need to reevaluate which areas we have. It's been 2 years. The city also has, a lot of empty buildings. I do actually agree with Steve. I'm personally a golf hater, so I'm here for getting rid of some of the golf courses. There's one that's a natural habitat that we shouldn't get rid of, but for the others,
Which one's that?
I can't remember the name of it.
Northeast by the slough?
I think so, yeah.
Colwith.
Okay, great. Jesse?
So I bring a budget frame to this, and for me, one thing that I see as an area of concern is the way the city administration has, and it's not a judgment on that, that's rightfully or wrongfully, we're going to have an administration that continues to have a large budget function, but for the first time in the city's history, we're going to have a distinct legislative function. There's not currently any plans to have any staff pertaining specifically to the budget. So what the administration is saying is, trust us, here are the numbers, and there's nobody that works specifically for the council. So for me, I'm interested in funding or potentially even reallocating positions from the administrative branch to the legislative branch so that we can have really good insight on what the budget is. And this is a day one priority.
So there's like a legislative revenue office, if you will?
Legislative budget office, specifically, yes.
So this came up, and I think we were in one of our District 2 interviews. Someone brought up that the city council members are only basically going to have one staff person. And everyone in the room, despite their stances on everything else, were pissed about that and said that is not enough. Is that raise of hands? Is anyone happy with like the current staffing model for city council members?
Do you want to answer that question? Happy or fine with?
Like willing to try it?
Well, of course, I mean, you're going to have to be willing to try it anyways,
Yeah.
but does anyone think that's adequate? Who thinks that's adequate? Raise your
I
hand.
think given the
Okay.
system it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
But if I could caveat it, but I also think, I'm also talking about the need to have a legislative budget office.
Sure.
2 or 3 individuals there. We're going to have a powerful council president, having more staff in that particular office, or a place for us to turn, almost an LPER, Legislative Policy and Research Office. If we don't all need to have an environmental specialist on our staff, we do need an environmental specialist to be able to turn
Sure.
to for policy questions.
All right, thank you.
Anybody
Steve?
else want to jump on the golf idea? 2 out of 6.
Yeah.
3?
Yeah.
3. I got 3.
Steve, first policy or ordinance you would bring to city council?
So as I said earlier, I think that the city should establish a small office. I don't know if it's 2 people or 4 people, of people whose whole job it is to look for sites for shelters, particularly safe rest villages. And I think that logically, the money for that should come out of the joint office. So like go to the county and like talk about, can you allocate some money for that purpose?
Why wouldn't you just hire a firm? There are firms all over town that look for sites for businesses and for industrial facilities. Why create more employees rather than just hiring people?
You'd have to look at that and see what's more cost effective. I mean, you'd have to, if it was sort of an ongoing thing, you'd have to sort of put a firm like that on retainer. So yeah, I'd be willing to consider that.
Okay, great, thank you. Rex?
Since you broke the rule about not cussing, I'm going to break the rule again.
Sorry.
Get our shit together. Oh my God. Oh my God, I know. I'm from the Midwest.
We have to stop the video.
Yeah.
Family thing here.
It's going to be bleak.
I'm trying to think what the acronym for that is, but I don't have that quick. But it's basically getting the council organized is going to be the first thing we need to do. And in terms of how do we want to structure ourselves, electing a president, which Jesse has referred to, setting up structures in terms of, and getting to know each other. And my experience at Metro was it took a while to develop a sense of trust between each and get to know everybody, because you come from all sorts of different worlds and you're thrown in a room, you're supposed to make big decisions. Well, how do I trust people? What do they know? What do I not know? How can I, work together with people? So setting up that system that says we're going to be creating a system that actually is responsive to the public, that is thoughtful and accountable, and that people can understand. Okay, so I think we have to create a legislature. We're going to have, from my perspective, we have to organize ourselves, call them committees, call them task forces, whatever, we have a huge utility responsibility we have to oversee. We have a major controversial water treatment plant being built that's not been under discussion yet. We're going to see our water bills skyrocket because of an internal decision on what kind of direction to go. That's utility stuff, for the clean water, sewer. We have to be prepared for earthquakes. What's our resilience strategy? How do we deal with specific issues like the tank farm, a very big issue, 300 million gallons of flammable fluid in a dangerous area? I don't know what the answer is. How do we work together? So that's the first thing I do is say, let's sit down and figure out how we're going to work together and be good public servants.
Economic development. I mean, I think everyone knows that both small businesses are struggling in the city. I think there's a lot of people that would say Prosper Portland is a little bit lost in sort of what their mission is. We still have businesses in downtown that are leaving. What do you think, and I'll ask this question of each of you, and please again try to keep it to a minute. what is the city not doing that it should be doing in order to spur economic development? And also, I'm very curious, I think this sort of falls along kind of political, ideological lines, but what is the role of outside money, out-of-state development? I know some people would say that out-of-state money is unnecessary for the city, and others would say, no, we need to attract that money here. So I'd ask each of you to incorporate that into
Can I
your answer.
append a question to that, just yes or no at the end? I think is, do you support the Live Nation venue at the east end of the,
Yeah.
Hawthorne Bridge?
Okay,
At the end of that.
let's start with Angelita.
What we can do to revive, or, sorry, there's a lot of pieces to that question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, what is the city not doing that it should be doing in order to bring back economic development? Is private money part of that solution, or is that not part of the solution? Out-of-state money. And then Live Nation, yes or no?
Live Nation, no. I don't want to harm the local music scene. And as far as revitalizing like small businesses and stuff, I think that we have a PR problem at the city. Our own elected officials and larger corporations have been talking about how terrible our city is 24/7, which is obviously going to harm getting out-of-state money here. I don't really understand the strategy there. I do understand the strategy for large businesses that are going to get a tax break, that have received a whole tax break zone in downtown now because the city is apparently so terrible that no one wants to operate here.
Do you not support the tax break that was passed?
Absolutely not, no. I think if you're a big business and you're coming here and you're taking a part of our city and our people are working for you, you need to contribute to the city as well. We need those dollars, and I'm very hesitant about a campaign against the city that would create that sort of dynamic. I think something that I would love to see is that people are shopping in districts in a different way than they were before. People aren't going as much to centralized downtown. I think that's for a lot of reasons. I think it's pretty expensive to park and drive there. I think our public transportation, not having Fairless Square, makes it pretty hard to access it. But also I think the pandemic made it so that people are shopping in their local areas more. So I've talked to some neighborhood associations like Roseway. They have a really cool plan to revitalize certain strips, certain streets and small businesses there, make it more pedestrian and bike access friendly. And I think that when you're just in proximity to your local businesses, you tend to shop there, buy stuff more. I mean, at least that's been my experience as someone that doesn't get to drive that often.
So, downtown Portland is a big reason why we have such a high tax base, and why I think Portlanders have been very willing to open their wallets to a lot more, more social services. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the future of downtown Portland?
I would love to see a return to Fairless Square and a more walkable downtown Portland. I think that all of the events that we have where people are really like joyful in community, shopping through small businesses like the Belmont Street Fair, people go to these events, people travel to France to go to a more walkable city where they can access these spaces. I would love to see a downtown that's revitalized that way. I would also like to see any new buildings that we have, whether it be housing, have small businesses at the bottom or like local resources at the bottom, to make sure in New York when they have any crime or violence issues, having places that are open and where people are watching each other, because there's it's not just housing, it's also storefronts at the bottom, was something that really changed their crime levels there. So.
Thank you. And then last questions, out-of-state money, out-of-state developers, do you think they have a place in the revitalization of downtown?
I think they do, and I think that we all have a responsibility to pay our fair share when we are reaping the rewards and profits of owning a business anywhere.
Great, thank you. Tiffany?
Can you tell me the different parts of the question?
Yes. What is the city not doing that it should be doing right now as far as spurring economic development? Do you support Live Nation, yes or no? And do you think out-of-state money has a part to play?
Okay.
Yeah.
Live Nation, no. I do believe we need to be realistic about how COVID has changed things. I don't think we're going to have all of these empty offices full of people Zooming. I think we need to be able to be willing to be creative and think about things like zoning. I was excited to hear about, talking about the empty lots. There are things that we can do, like thinking about a land value tax, so people are incentivized to not just sit on lots. Also thinking about vacant buildings and making sure that small businesses can get into those. been talking to quite a few different small business owners. A few of them I've taught their kids last year, that people that own Oblique Coffee and a small brewery in my district. And here I've heard some horror stories about what it is like to deal with the commercial real estate companies that are running these businesses. Really hard. Sometimes they're out of state. Really hard to actually talk to a person when you don't have heat all winter.
So and sorry to interrupt you, but residential, I mean, that was sort of a fun idea that a lot of people had, that, you know, downtown, instead of being office spaces, we can convert it to residential. It turns out like very, very few of the buildings downtown are actually would even be feasible. It'd be cheaper to tear it down and then build new. So what do you do with those empty office spaces if it's not Zoomers?
There's an empty office space in downtown that now has a school. I mean, we can think about, can we put some of our preschool for all schools in there? Can we have those spaces for startups, for new businesses, for nonprofits?
Great, thank you. Dan?
I mean, anyone running for council is in part running to have an office downtown. And I think the truth is that I would feel a little bit uncomfortable asking my one staffer to stay till 9 p.m. if they're gonna be taking the bus home. I think that's why we're not seeing as much investment in downtown right now as we might hope or expect. When it comes to outside money, I know about 8 years ago, we were the third most popular place in the country for money to come and build new housing. And today, we're 53rd, behind Detroit. So Detroit's doing some really cool things. I'm not trying to denigrate Detroit. All I'm trying to say is, we have to be attractive, we have to be welcoming, we have to be inviting. And right now, when you go downtown, we see people experiencing severe mental illness, and I don't blame people for avoiding that. I think when it comes to Live Nation, I don't think we got as good of a deal out of them as we could have. We're giving them too much free stuff.
Yes or no on Live Nation?
As put together, no.
Okay.
Okay. The plan is not good.
Because getting the land for cheap, or too cheap in your mind?
Yep.
Okay.
And the city should never sell land it owns. It's just does not make sense unless we're getting $1 billion out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That land is crucial when it comes to, I think, reimagining downtown. I used to live in Old Town. Old Town is less dense in terms of population than Inner Belmont. And a lot of those buildings are empty, but there's still a lot of empty lots. I'd like to see the city encourage the development of those empty lots, including a lot of lots that are still owned by the city. A couple years ago, last summer, I was doing outreach, talking with people who are living on the streets in Old Town, and I talked to a man named Miles, who is living next to a lot that is across the street from the old Greyhound station. He's living in his tent. And that lot, we had a nonprofit contractor at Multnomah County who received 100% of their funding from the county. That summer, the staff there said that they were trained to provide services and connect people to housing. They weren't there to treat gunshot and stab wounds. And so they started organizing a union. And as soon as they started signing cards, the site got shut down. So we lost 40 beds of shelter in Old Town because the staff were underpaid and they were trying to advocate for themselves in the workplace. And that lot is across the street from the joint office.
What was that nonprofit again? Was it Do Good? No. One of them.
There's like 100. I can't remember all the names.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I think you wrote about it.
We did.
Good.
Okay, well, trying to steer us back to the question that was at hand, which one is the future downtown, and the future downtown needs to change. The office buildings that are there, the class ones, A class or class ones, they will fill up eventually as the economy grows again, even with the change of work pattern. But there are a lot of 1-, 2-, 3-story buildings and vacant lots, parking lots that are available for redevelopment. The question is will the owners of those lots or the owners of those old buildings accept a lower value for those? As you saw, the Montgomery Ward building, Montgomery Park, sold for a fraction of its value. And that's a change. And downtown, if it became a neighborhood, it would support the kind of street traffic and activity that would be beneficial. Just like the Pearl, if you compare Pearl to Old Town, the difference is there's people living in the Pearl. There are people are not living in Old Town anymore, so it's changed. Outside money, of course. We want to be a place that we attract businesses and people from around the world, and they should bring their capital here and say this is a great place to be. The question is, how do we make sure we accommodate people who are growing up here and can't afford the housing price changes that happen when you attract people, and that means we need to have a housing strategy that speeds up development of housing, provides. There's a lot more vacant lots than just golf courses. I'd actually say many of the schools in the city, especially Park Grove, Centennial, have very huge campuses. I'd love to see housing for teachers on those campuses. It'd be great. So there's a lot of opportunities there. I support COLA and the Molson Beam Development doing a project. They are investing in the city when most people are not. And we use the word Live Nation like there's some evil creature coming from outside, but it's a local project being developed by local people. And that's what we want to have happen.
Great, thank you. Steve?
I wrote to the council before the vote last week about Live Nation, and I said, I live every day with guilt because I let another big evil rapacious corporation, Uber, come into town, and I live with the guilt of the impact of that on the taxi industry and taxi drivers. So I told the council, if there's a legal way to keep Live Nation out, I want you to find a way to avoid you having the kind of guilt that I have. In terms of economic development,
Do you regret the Uber vote?
oh yes, every day. I think I've made that clear. I mean, and one thing that that I would do if I were elected is, at a minimum, introduce an ordinance to require Uber to have live under the same insurance requirements that taxi companies do. Actually, I think I wrote an op-ed in the Tribune about that like 6 years ago.
I should read them more.
You really should. It's a fine paper.
We had a radio cab candidate in here yesterday. We'd be thrilled to hear you say that.
Yeah. Well, actually, so in terms of economic development, I mean, our economic advantage used to be that we don't have a big research university, we don't have a bunch of Fortune 500, headquarters. Our advantage for years was we were considered a great place to live. And that meant the companies were willing to locate here because they thought that their employees were willing to be here, potential employees. And it also meant that we were considered a great place to be, and so people would come from the suburbs to shop. So now we are dealing with both the reality and the exaggerated perception that we are a city that's overrun with homeless camps and crime. So the most important thing to do in terms of economic development, whether it's attracting money from out of state or getting suburbanites to come back down, is to address both that reality and that perception.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, I gotta interrupt. We talk to recruiters for Intel, for Nike, for Columbia Sportswear. They're all discouraging people to move to Portland. And none of them say it's the homeless problem. Or they don't say that it's number one. They say two things. One, we've got the highest marginal tax rate in America. And two, we have a failing Portland public school system. So I realize that neither of those two are exactly in your portfolio, but it seems to me that this obsession with homelessness, while important, is perhaps not stepping back and looking at some of the bigger challenges this city is facing. And I'd love to have any of you respond to it or not. Yes?
Well, I'd love to respond to the education piece. Having been in education and working with educators on the outdoor school piece, I've worked with educators around the state. I've helped elect a couple of school board members to Portland Public School. And I say the city's success is going to be based on the success of its people. Okay, so, and how do you become successful? You get opportunities through education. And it's not just the Portland Public Schools, it's our public schools in general. We get short-shifted by the state's funding formula, and so we do not get the dollar. We send dollars to the rest of the state to have great education elsewhere. Not enough comes here, but it's also PSU. I went to PSU, I graduated without a loan, with no debt, and I was a working dad. I was able to do that through the public school, to our public state colleges. Currently, the state pays 16% of the budget of Portland State University, and we're cutting. How do you grow a strong community and educated, trained people if you don't invest in them? And it's not the city's job, it's the city's job to speak up and say, this has to change. And we have the legislative power within the city, and in terms of our representatives and senators who can move things, and we need to use that. We need to say it's our responsibility to make sure our education system actually works.
Okay. Jesse, can we have you? Sorry, we'll move back to this question, but Jesse, go ahead.
So I've been tracking things Live Nation Ticketmaster since, 1997 Pearl Jam stand, when they wanted to keep their tickets affordable. So I've been skeptical of the company since. I've seen the consolidation of the industry over the years, and around a year ago, give or take, when nobody was paying attention to the city council race, I was using my 5 followers on social media to talk about about the worries about bringing Live Nation in. We've got a couple of local great colas being development, great companies involved here, but we absolutely do not need an external company operating that facility. And in terms of, I'll just continue down this, the rest of my answer I'll go with yes and. I would very specifically like to see the city invest a little bit more in the arts and music tourism. Just on Sunday night, I went out to Edgefields. We're losing shows to Troutdale, we're losing shows to Ridgefield, we're losing shows to Forest Grove, and we're even losing shows to Canby. Meanwhile, a few weeks back, I managed to go to a favorite, I have the privilege of traveling almost every year to see live music, so I guess I'm the target audience. Many times it's a festival. This year it was not because of time. Hewer Heights, Ohio, I was in a 5,000-ish person outdoor amphitheater that was actually owned by the city, accentuating the point that you don't need an external owner of these properties. I think that we have opportunities, potentially even in the Bowl in downtown Portland, to have a lasting outdoor amphitheater of some type that would breathe a lot of life into downtown Portland, especially those businesses nearby. So I think that's an addition that I would add.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, were you a yes or no on Live Nation?
I'm a very hard no.
Hard, sorry, I blacked out for a moment.
I just have a couple individual questions for a couple people. Daniel, you've been known in the past year and a half to throw a lot of stones at Jessica Vega Peterson and how the county is using its homelessness funds. What's a policy decision that JVP has made that you're in support of? Just one.
Right now, just yesterday, I was talking with Dr. Sharon Myron about this proposal to amend the budget advisory process at the county level to ensure that the practices that have been in place there for the last couple of years are actually reflected in the county code. I mean, I'm in this race because I had the silly idea to read the county code and learn that the county
Sorry, back to the question.
Yes.
What's a policy decision JVP has made?
JVP has made. I was at the Bybee Lakes Hope Center when they first received the letter, standing with them, when they first received the letter announcing that the county was looking at funding Bybee Lakes. I think funding Bybee Lakes was a great decision.
Okay.
I want to thank you for that.
Great.
It's not going to work for everyone, but it works for people who
Thank
live
you.
there.
Steve, you lost to Chloe Daly in what year, 2016?
That's right.
Okay. I was looking at the vote spread, and you lost by quite a few votes in this district, in District 3. Why do you think you lost, and what did you learn from that?
I think I lost for a variety of reasons. I was talking to somebody recently who said that she knew a lot of people who voted against me because of Uber, and I was kind of happy to hear that because it's like, okay, if we're going to lose, that's a good reason to lose. I think part of it was there was a developing grumpiness in the city generally. People were concerned about housing prices and homelessness, and I was somebody to take that out on. And I also think that I was too impatient and combative on a variety of issues during my term, and that contributed to it. In terms of this district, one thing that I would note is that when I first ran in 2012 and when I ran for Senate in 2008, I think I did significantly better in this district than in the rest of the city. So I hope I'll be able to recapture some of the votes of people who used to like me.
Thanks. Tiffany, you have outraised, I think, any other candidate in this entire race. Like, why? Why do you think that is? I mean, have you been more aggressive in door knocking? Have you had more campaign materials? Are you just really nice? Like, what? Why do you think you've raised so much money?
Yeah, it turns out when you've taught for 16 years and taught everyone's children, they're very excited to support your campaign and volunteer. And that question is asked almost every day to me and my campaign manager. And a lot of people kind of want this formula, like, what are you doing exactly? And my campain manager has started telling people, you have to be Tiffany. You have to be Teacher Tiffany. Like, we don't have a magic. I mean, when we first launched in October, I did Oregon Labor Candidate School. I did Emerge. I've really seen a big part of the last year is really learning, and I was forced by my team to sit on the phone and do call time, and just call every single person that I know, and so that's a piece of it, and Now I'm happy that I've done all of that. I'd love to talk about schools at some point. I know
Okay,
you left,
okay.
but
Can I follow up on a question there? Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
I would like you to follow up on Mark's question from like what feels like 14 years ago.
Should I wait till he's back or?
I don't really care that he's here.
Okay, yeah, you can.
There's been a coup anyway, so.
Yeah.
Apparently. I'm just very curious about your answer to this question about schools.
Schools
You've
and-
actually been in them.
Absolutely. I mean, just to paint a little bit of a picture to go back, I decided I wanted to be a teacher in 2nd grade and have not veered from that. This is the first time that I'm considering stepping away from the classroom. I had an amazing 2nd grade teacher. It's something that I love doing. This is my 16th year. I'm currently teaching. Someone else is teaching my 3rd grade class right now, so I can be here. Yeah, our public schools are struggling. There's no way that you get 99% of any group to agree on something unless they're really struggling. And I just want to name that the strike was one of the hardest things I've been through. I feel like it's been harder, I don't know, just whatever, I feel like it's been harder than running for office. Because leading it, being on the steering committee, I was the lead external organizer for years leading up to the strike. We're talking about schools. I'm talking about how awful the strike felt for me and how hard it was to feel like the pressure of you're holding so much responsibility for all these children, all these teachers, all their families. At the same time, it also was one of the most empowering things that I've experienced too. A lot of people are like, what are the specific things that came out of it? Like I can point to certain things in the contract. I can tell you, last year I didn't have any prep time until 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. So all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, I was like sprinting without children. Now I have a prep every single day. There are some things that actually are specific like that. Bigger than that is the fact that as we're talking about fully funding our schools, there's a group of caregivers, of parents that have a website, Families for Equity in Schools. They are continuing to lobby. They see now that they can have some power, that they can have some voices, that it's not just something that they have to throw their hands up about and say like, oh, we just really don't fund our schools that well in Oregon. Parents know that they have some power, they have a voice. So when people ask me about the strike, that's actually one of the things I point to, that there's that group.
I'm curious, there was some criticism after the fact from some PAT members of how Angela Bonilla handled this thing and that she and union leadership drew it out when it didn't have to be drawn out and kids didn't have to miss however many days of school. Where do you land on that?
It was a really, really hard time. And I mean, if you think about like 5,000 people, there's no one way to move forward where everyone's going to be
How would
in
you have
agreement.
wanted to move forward? Would you have moved forward differently than the union did?
I am the union. I'm part of that. I was part of the steering committee. I was part of a lot of conversations where a lot of different voices and there were a lot of different opinions. I think that Angela and I think we did the best that we could, especially being this very historic first time this ever happened. I know that something I'm always going to lean on is process and like what can we learn from that. So we did a ton of checking in at every single school and getting surveys, talking to teachers, holding listening sessions afterwards to see, how did you feel about that? Obviously, there are a lot of things that weren't perfect. It was rocky in a lot of ways.
I guess I don't feel like respectfully that you've answered the question. Kids missed 18 days of school, and the question I think that we're asking is, was it worth it?
Yes.
It was.
Absolutely, because now, this year, when my classroom got up to 88 degrees, when the little thermometer that my union paid for to put in my classroom, kid stands up and goes, it's too hot, I need to tell the principal. So it's a similar feeling of like, these children now feel empowered. The first time a rat ran through the classroom after the strike, one kid stood up and started saying, hot, cold, rats, mold, and the kids were chanting it, this is getting really old. It's been pretty normalized for rats to run through the classroom. I remember a few years ago, I was helping children on the playground deal with a dispute. This is very common. I do it every day in my job. It was about the rats. There was a group that wanted to catch the rats and kill the rats. There was a group that was making signs all over and putting them up around saying, save the rats, peace for the rats, Sunnyside Environmental School. And I remember took it seriously because that was important to them and how messed up that was like in their dramatic play. So yeah, it was awful and hard, and I do think it was important.
Sorry, we're going to keep it.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a
we
question?
can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think the union's action on Gaza was productive?
I think that's a great question. What I will say, what I think probably most people in this room will agree with is that what's happening in Gaza is horrific and really hard. And what I know is that when you are really far from a situation that's so horrific, that it can be really hard to know exactly how to handle it and what to do. I'm gonna talk about process again. I think that the union is working on making a process for how do you vet materials, how do you make sure that there is a process. So I think that work definitely needs to be done.
Do you think the union had a place in this conflict, and do you think that it changed anything?
Change anything?
Well, I'm
in
wondering,
Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, what and you know, it alienated a lot of Jewish parents. I mean, we heard from them.
And teachers?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, would you have done the same thing again? Would you do the same thing again?
That's implying that I was part of that.
Well, did you
I wasn't.
support it?
No, I wasn't part of it.
Okay.
I wasn't part of that. I didn't teach those lessons. That was something that I found out after the fact.
You didn't support the union's position on this?
I wouldn't go that far. I would say I support my fellow teachers in figuring out how to have these discussions, which are incredibly hard. And there are teachers, there are parents that all have different views. I do believe it's my union's job. It's our job to have those conversations and work out, how are we going to move forward? I do trust my educators in the end to figure out the best way to listen to the different voices. And I think that an important piece there is having a process. We need to have a process for how to vet materials.
All right, rapid fire questions. One word a piece, and if you try to say a sentence, I will cut you off. Do you think Portland Police needs fewer cops, more cops, or has the right number now? Angelita.
Right number.
Right number, okay.
Work with what we have. I guess it's right number.
Okay.
More.
Okay.
More.
Okay.
More.
Okay.
More.
Okay. Did the Oregon legislature do the right thing by recriminalizing fentanyl? Yes or no? Let's start with you, Jesse.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Are you in support of the Clinton Triangle, which is the city's first temporary alternative shelter site? Angelita.
Yes.
Okay.
As it is right now, no.
Why not? I'm breaking my
I get
rule.
more
Why-
words?
Yeah, you get 4. No, just kidding. A sentence.
I'm worried about what I've heard about the group. Is it Alchemy?
Urban Alchemy. Okay.
That's
Concerns
running it.
about that. Okay.
I would
Daniel.
that as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes means you support it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Do you support the city remaining in the joint office? I think we
Did that.
already, never mind. Okay. Based on your knowledge of City Hall, what's the one bureau or office that you would most like to do an audit of? Not because you think it's great, but because you have concerns about it. Angelita.
Police Bureau.
Okay.
I'm not sure which bureau this is under, but the Enhanced Services District, and it needs to be looked at.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Daniel.
Small donor elections.
Okay.
Maybe you know something we don't know.
Rex.
Prosper Portland.
Okay.
Police Bureau.
Okay.
Police.
Okay. Which member of City Council, the current City Council, do you think has done the most for this city? Angelita.
Carmen.
Okay.
Carmen.
Okay.
Dan Ryan.
Okay.
And Dan Ryan.
Okay.
Carmen.
Okay. Okay. Do you support the city rerouting excess PSEF revenues to fill budget holes in bureaus? Let's start with you, Jesse.
Not initially.
What about now?
No, I think he means not initially.
He said not now.
Not at the moment.
So no.
I think it's a discussion we could have, but I'm somebody that I've worked around policy, I've worked around budget, and until we get in and get a good hard look at the budget, it's hard to set for me anything budget. I'm gonna be hard pressed to say yes or
Got it.
no.
Okay,
Because
thanks.
I was in full picture.
Okay. Steve?
I can't answer that with a simple yes or no.
How would you have voted on, because the City Council voted a couple months ago to do this, how would you have voted at that time?
It would depend on what you're talking about. I think that.
I think they approved $250 million.
And I think some of it was on things that didn't make sense, a lot of it was things that did. I think that investing in PBOT programs that reduce carbon emissions, filling those budget gaps, I think is absolutely appropriate. I think that taking some of the money to go to Portland street response, as Carmen Rubio proposed, is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. Rex.
As long as it fulfills the mission or the vision of PCF, then it's fine.
Okay. Daniel.
Yes, but I'd like to check with voters again.
So bring PCF back to ballot.
Yeah.
Okay. Tiffany.
I feel like it's kind of, okay, so I can answer it.
Yes.
I can just say
One
what I want. Okay. Yeah, it shouldn't be used to just fill holes.
Okay.
in the budget.
How would you have voted on what council voted on 3 months ago?
No, because the committee wasn't even like fully on board, and that needs to be the first step, the minimum.
I would agree with Steve's analysis on it, where I'm okay with it being used for more things as long as it is tied to the mission, and as long as it's there to reduce carbon emissions, and particularly to help people of color, because that's what PCEF was designed for.
How would you have voted on the vote that City Council did take a vote on?
I guess no, based on that.
Okay. Do you support the city's camping ban, yes or no, Angelita?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Qualified, yes.
Okay.
Yes as well, and you reframed the previous question as to if you would have voted for what came before the council.
Yes.
And I think the answer to that would have been yes because of the extensive
Okay.
community outreach that was done.
Got it.
Am I allowed to say more?
No.
No,
Sorry.
sorry.
Got to cut people off. Who is the one person at this table that you would most like to serve alongside on City Council in your district? We'll start in the middle, Daniel.
You can name one of us too.
Yeah.
Sophie for auditor, I think, right?
Brave
Council
mistake.
president.
Yeah. I see this election as every district is picking someone who's progressive, someone who's moderate, and trying to figure out who's in the middle. Out of the progressives, I'd love to work with Jesse.
Okay. Tiffany.
Angelita.
Okay. Angelina.
Tiffany.
All right. Jesse.
Steve Novick.
Okay. Steve.
I don't want to answer this question because I don't want anybody who gets elected to think that I didn't want to serve with them. I will say that I've known Jesse for years. He was very good about taking my calls about ideas for Bernie Sanders. He was working for Bernie Sanders. So it'd be hard for me not to vote for him. However, he's refused to take my campaign advice. Since he was Bernie Sanders' body man, I think he should be running as Jesse the Body Man Cornette. So the fact that he's not doing that makes me hesitate.
So who would you say if you had to pick someone?
If I had to pick someone, it would be Jesse.
Okay. All right. Rex.
I'm not going to pick someone.
Why not?
Old habits die hard. I've been in politics a long time, and it's just we're all. I've said this, suggesting others that we're competitors. It's like the Olympics. So versus the old days of oppositional, we're going to have 3 people on the podium, and there may be a 1/10 of a second separating each of us, and we'll all be winners. And so I don't see people as opponents, but we are competing for a seat. And I don't know all 30 people, but I hope we could work with any of the 30 people that get elected.
Okay. Last question we are asking.
Can I ask
Yeah.
just one question, rapid fire, one question? Are you scared? So Portland used to have a slogan, kind of like "Keep Portland Weird," but Tim Walz kind of changed that around. It's not so attractive anymore. If you could just give like one slogan you would use to tell the world that Portland is still here and still attractive, really just one slogan. It can be 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, but nothing longer than that. What would it be right now? And let's see, where have we not started? Middle area. Let's start with
Daniel.
And we'll go Daniel,
He's
and we'll go
gonna
this
start
way.
like 10 times.
So you just
He's been the middle.
just the elevator pitch, on a billboard.
Phrase. I mean, we're still the city that works, right? Let's fulfill that obligation.
City that works. Okay.
City that still works.
The city that's working again, I guess.
Rex.
Okay.
Green, beautiful, welcoming, and exciting.
Okay. Steve.
I'll steal Charlie Hale's old line. Portland can still be the best European city in America.
Okay. Jesse.
Stop listening to Fox News about Portland.
Angelita.
I'm gonna say keep Portland weird. I think we should stick with the classic.
Tiffany.
I feel like there are other people that are way better at coming up with slogans.
We came up with
I
know
Teacher
we can-
Tiffany.
No, other people, Northwest Labor Press called me that first.
You can hire White and Ken.
We're in this together.
Okay. Fun question. We're asking everyone this. What were you best known for in high school? I'll give you guys an example of what we all thought was the best one so far. We had one candidate say he was the only person on the varsity soccer team that didn't play a minute all season, and he was only there because of nepotism. Which we thought was delightful. So anyways, what were you known for? Were you voted most likely to succeed? Were you voted worst dressed? Who'd you hang out with? Jocks, nerds,
That's a good one in high school.
Did you steal a car?
No, I'm not stealing cars. Getting all the bow ties from one of my teachers' dead husband and wearing one every day.
God, okay.
Jeez, I had to learn how to tie bow ties and stuff.
Okay. Steve,
I didn't go to high school.
were you working?
This is a lot. When I was in 9th grade, which is junior high school, the voters of Cottage Grove decided they didn't want to pay property taxes that year, so school ceased to exist for a few months. And I started taking classes at the U of O and just didn't go back.
All right, known for not going to high school. Okay. Jesse.
Not a high school guy.
I was known for skipping high school with a snowboard as much as possible.
Okay.
And Anthony, yes, I did.
You stole a car?
I did, yeah.
What kind of car?
It was an El Camino. It was a group of friends. Somebody had the keys to it. And I remember it was an El Camino because we were laying down in the back so we didn't get pulled over and caught. And we took it to the local Kmart parking lot. Most of us walked home. I have no idea what happened to that car.
Angelita.
I was known for being really good at drawing and scaring bullies.
How would you scare the bullies?
There was, this is such a, I don't know, my friend was on the water polo team and she was a girl, you know, and they would get sexually harassed sometimes, and I would just go talk to the young men and set them straight.
Okay. Tiffany.
I was known for being like a pollinator between all the different groups. Like I could hang out with like the cross country crew, and I also hung out with like the artsy folks, and we took a ceramics class together. Had like the Asian group would hang out, and I could move between them. There's a group of us, we all worked at CVS and had like that crew, and so is someone that I get a lot of energy from different types of people, different groups, and I'm still that way.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming in.
Daniel.
Sorry, Daniel. Sorry.
Well, that was just last year for you.
Yeah.
I know.
For me, I think back 50 years. Okay, what?
I skipped my senior year, and I led the largest movement of students opting out of the state standardized tests.
In Oregon?
In Oregon, we had 77% of students opt out of the new Common Core state tests.
What school? Sorry.
This is Lake Oswego High School.
Did you get a
not
GED?
graduate?
No, I did it in 3 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you know Lucas?
No, he's too old.
No. But your tax question, I've made a commitment to no new taxes. We have way too high taxes here, and we have too many taxes in particular. I think that's part of it, and especially we're not getting the money's worth.
And all voted on by the voters.
Yeah. So we can pay them all at once in one.
That and
Streamline it.
Can we not have to send it to 6 different PO boxes
Oh, my
and then get a note
goodness.
and say you didn't pay, and then have the Fed?
yes, and you should be able to pay your arts tax by volunteering.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Great to meet you all in person.